Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nerdy Affair, where we take our Wizard of the Coast and pair them up with our saucy media setting. I'm Cody.
And I'm Joe. I
Yeah.
don't know where that came from. Hey Cody. How
Yeah.
have you been, my friend?
Oh, I've been good. I've been cleaning off my running sneakers,
Really?
oiling my bike,
Uh-huh.
uh, making sure I have enough poffins for this adventure.
It's- uh, oh, I get it.
Uh-huh.
You know,
That's, that was a deep cut
I was like,
into our bit.
we did Stranger Things already.
Nope.
I was just like putting on our running shoe. What? Like
Yeah,
it's
that's a deep cut for all you fans out there who know what we're talking about for this episode, or just saw the title or
shh.
the image of
Titles
the
don't
thing.
exist.
Ah, yes. I forgot the number one rule of podcasts is that images don't exist. Your eyes deceive you.
Yeah. But hey, it looks like Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is
Is
back
back at it again.
again, looking for love in all the wrong places.
Well, we don't want to tell them the wrong places.
No, we want to tell them the right places. And
Yeah.
so this week our pop culture property wants to be the very best, like no one ever was. They
I really
enjoy
wish I could go on.
what? Yeah.
I was just gonna say I really wish I could do a Ash Ketchum voice, but his voice is so like it's weirdly like childlike but deep.
Yeah.
Like
Um,
it is by far one of the strangest main character voices that is so iconic to Ash Ketchum.
yeah, I
Have you ever thought about that? How weird like I'm even trying to like formulate that his voice in my throat and I can't. Like my throat just doesn't go that low, but also like that high at the same time. It's weird.
I mean it is. It's a fascinating thing, right? But hey, this person enjoys, or this pop culture property enjoys raising adorable murderous pets,
Aw.
exploring brave and bold new worlds,
Ooh.
and also like maybe stopping like gangs and or government conspiracies depending on the game.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
you know.
and if you haven't figured it out by now, maybe consider turning off the episode, because this might not be for you. It's Pokes Ski Mans.
Oh, yeah, the good old Pokemon. How are your Pokemans doing?
How my Pokemans doing? Let me show you my
Yeah.
Pokemans. They're let me show them to you. They're right here. I haven't played that game in
Oh,
a minute. But
yeah.
you know something I like about Pokemon?
Huh.
Um, Unlike another game that also features adorable animals that become your friends, um, Pokemon exists in a world where when I turn it on, like the Pokemon don't know how long it's been since I last played it. And they'll still be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, look, it's my buddy Joe. They're back to have me fight other Pokemon." Whereas like Animal Crossing characters, like it's been 48 hours since I've seen you, and I thought you died, and I'm moving away forever. And I was like, "Oh, okay, um,
Yeah, I feel like
cool."
if I ever go back to my island, it's going to be completely empty.
Yeah, it's
Tom Nook has abandoned me, and the only thing that exists on my island is my house that is covered in, nature. The forest has taken it back over. It's donezo.
Yeah, that
I can't
island
go back.
forest.
Yeah, that island forest.
But yeah, so yeah, Pokemon, it's like one of those it's one of those games where all right, so here's my big confession about Pokemon.
Sure.
Is I played Yellow and then I
Uh-huh.
did not play again until um Sword and Shield.
What a wild thing to say online.
But I know a
Like
lot about it.
I'm trying to like imagine in my brain playing Yellow and then seeing the evolution of the entire series as playing from Pokemon Sword and Shield, because so many things have changed since then.
I mean, it's one of those deals where it was like there were certainly ones that I really wanted to play. Like I kind of want
Yeah,
to go back and try to find a way to play all of them, and I'm hoping that at some point like we get like cool Switch emulations of different um
I
versions
think
of the game.
yeah, there's eShop games for Red, Blue, and maybe Yellow,
Interesting. I'm gonna have to go check
and
those out.
then maybe Gold and Silver. Don't quote
Um,
me on that, but yeah, they're working on it.
and I
I'm
think
sure they've got ways to milk that Pokemon money.
well, and I think it's one of those deals where I was like much like a lot of things in my pop culture past. I kind of arrived a little too late to the party. And
Sure,
so I kinda got there when it was, like, starting to lose its steam, and,
I feel that. I feel that.
and then it was also one of those deals where it's like, I know this is not a universal truth, but, Pokemon very much went through an uncool period, where it was just like, you didn't even think about Pokemon because that's what, like, n nerd babies played. Um
It is weird how if you grew up like if you were like 9 or 10 when Pokemon Red and Blue came out, there was very much like a falling out after, because like Red and Blue were so like, whoa, there's a handheld game where you can trade and capture these little cute monsters, and then it like fell off, and then like by the time they kind of reinvented the Pokemon genre by adding some really cool stuff, like we were in high school.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Is like I heard about I think it was like White and Black. Maybe
Yeah,
were those the ones that
uh-huh.
came out when we were in high school?
No, those would have came out in our college days. You're
Okay.
probably thinking of Ruby and Sapphire.
It's possible I'm thinking of in any case, it was one of those deals where I kind of was like shocked. I was like, they're still making those? Like
Right.
it was something I had not thought of. It had not occupied my brain space in so long. And I guess it, it makes sense, right? Because like you're catching these monsters who are adorable, and then like the more you play with them, they get like bigger and stronger. Then they added like aspects of like friendship, which I think have always been there, but it was like a little bit easier to gamify like the friendship aspect of Pokemon, where it was like
Right, right.
when they're your friends, like they treat you a little bit nicer, or they maybe hit a little bit harder. And now it's like straight up explicit in Sword and Shield, right? Where it's like your faves will like defy death for you because they don't want you to be sad. Um,
Right, right.
but it's interesting, right? Because like you said, like to kind of go from yellow to Sword and Shield was like a crazy thing. And that was like one of the major reasons I wanted to switch in the first place was I was so entranced by those commercials. I was like, I think I have to get a Switch.
Right.
Um,
No, I mean, it that was when I heard that the rumor mill was that after Sun and Moon and their expansion titles that they were moving over to the Switch. I was like, well shit, I know what I need to get now. Granted, I was already kind of on the way out
yeah.
of Pokemon again, but for other reasons. Not because it's not cool, because Pokemon is dope as shit, but um, I'm starting to get to the point where those games are not made for my brain space, I guess.
Interesting.
I think first and foremost, it's always going to be like aimed and geared towards kids.
Yeah, but in a way
So
that I
you're
like.
gonna right, and like don't get me wrong, I bought Sword and Shield and I bought the first DLC for Sword and Shield. So like I'm still buying them. I'm just like it isn't nearly as like exciting as like those first like couple of games where really felt like, whoa, this is the first time I'm seeing this. But yeah,
Mhm.
I can't even imagine from Yellow to Sword and Shield. That'd be like watching flip book, it's almost like the equivalent of like flip book animations and then seeing what like Pixar can do today.
I mean, fair enough, right?
Like, oh, there's these flat images that like occasionally move, and like it's there's no colors, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, these are fully 3D rendered Pokemon in big 3D worlds, and they like move around and do shit. Like, holy shit, that would be, if I could experience that, that would be dope.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we're thinking about today. We're going to be talking a little bit about how you might build some mechanics to create a one shot or maybe even short campaign in the Pokemon world.
Yeah.
Um, so I can kick this off because I'm sure that my answers or my one thing is the question on everybody's mind.
Yes.
Uh, how do you build these ding dang Pokemons?
Yeah, how
Uh,
do you ding dang do it?
um, so um, I will admit right off the top, these ideas might need a little bit of tooling and might be a little bit broken. Um, but here are some ideas I had. So, um, one of the things about Pokemon is that a fair number of them are based on real life animals or some mythological creatures. Um, and so they have, but the thing is that they just have like different elemental types and abilities. So I think because of this, it's not impossible to think of how you could translate taking characters straight out of the monster manual and turning them into Pokemon. Um, so basically what would happen is you would give them their base stats and base attack. This varies based on the animal, but for instance, like a rat can do a bite that does, I believe, 1d4 damage. Um, and then you would give them sort of like a full like a coin flip between Blade Ward or True Strike as cantrips. So this would in Pokemon mechanics act as things like the bite or tackle, and then something like Tail Whip or Growl. Um, those are kind of standard moves that a lot of Pokemon come with that you catch them with. Birds have like Peck and things like that. But after that, you determine the Pokemon type. So I looked this up. There are 18 types of Pokemon, meaning that upon encountering a new Pokemon, the player rolls a natural, or rather, the player rolls a d20. 2 to 18 will coordinate with the different Pokemon types. A natural 20 is player choice, giving them the ability to choose a type that their Pokemon might be strong against or one that they might not have yet. And then a natural 1 is DM's choice, giving them the ability to choose the type of Pokemon that the party might be weak against. For simplicity's sake, I would argue that you should not try to do any hybrid type Pokemon. I don't know at what point hybrid type Pokemon were introduced. It might be as early as Generation 1, but I feel like that's just a little too complicated to pull off this time around. Okay, so once we're done determining character type, the player rolls a d12 on a d12 table to indicate what special type move these characters will get. So, as a DM, this requires you to do a little bit of work, creating some tables of spells that you think could conceivably fall into the various types. This might be a little bit more difficult for some than others, but for instance, psychic types could get things like Vicious Mockery or Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Fire types might get something like Firestorm or Sacred Flame. Water types, obviously, there are a bunch of different kinds of water spells, Shape Water, Tsunami, things like that. Um, so the higher the number, the more powerful the move is, but the more limited number of uses your Pokemon can have. So, for instance, spells that are on the 1 to 6 might be lower level or cantrip spells that a Pokemon might be able to do a little bit more frequently. But if you were to roll a 12 on the fire table, your Pokemon might get Firestorm, but they might only be able to use that once per day. Um, so as your Pokemon begins to get fight and grow, they could potentially gain access to new spells, once again rolled randomly on the table. Each Pokemon would be able to know 4 things at once, or as they get stronger as well, they might gain the ability to use certain spells more frequently. Much like the game, there will be a limited number of Pokemon per player, variable based on the number of party members you have. So, for instance, squad of 6 players, everyone might only be able to have 1 or 2 Pokemon on them at a time. If you only have 1 or 2, you might increase the number of Pokemon they can have on them at any given time. Much like clerics or druids, your Pokemon are prepared at the beginning of the day. The Pokemon that you have caught that you don't have on your person exist in a basically in your box, your Pokebox. And so my biggest concern as I was coming up with this is there's a really good chance that balance might be an issue with this system. So this is something I would highly advise paying attention to and tweaking. But I think it's possible to build some real honest to goodness Pokemon. And I don't even necessarily think it's fair to do a randomized roll on the table because sometimes a low level Pokemon can learn a higher level move in the game. And then as you kind of grind with them, they get a little bit more powerful as well. So, like I said, pay attention um, to the spells that you have slotted in certain places. Pay attention to how the balance works. But I think that with a little bit of patience and paying attention, you can build some honest to goodness Pokemon.
Nice. You know, this whole time I've been trying to figure out when they introduced dual typing,
Oh yeah,
and I want to say it came out in Diamond and Pearl, but I could be totally wrong. I know like later games, like I think Fire Red and Leaf Green, and like a lot of the older games, they made the original like Gen 1 and Gen 2 maybe it was Gen 3. But yeah, dual typing for this kind of game would be just an absolute nightmare to try to build.
yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have any major thoughts about that?
Um I think since we haven't played, like, we obviously don't have time to play test all of these things, although it would be arguably it would be really fun to do. um I think your mileage is going to vary, and as long as you kind of keep in the spirit of Pokemon, and like, if your Pokemon faints or whatever, like, it's fine. It's not, you don't have to play like gritty realism where it's like, oh, you lost a Pokemon because something didn't work the way it intended or things like that. I think as long as you're in the
Oh,
spirit of Pokemon, uh I think your rules uh are good, you just gotta, work you gotta work with those Pokemon stats, or your monster stats, whatever you want to call them.
yeah. All right. What are you bringing to the table, my friend?
Oh, I'm going to talk about catching these pocket
I
monsters.
heard a rumor you got to
So,
catch them all.
yeah, you do have to catch them all according to Pokemon. So, to catch one of these Pokemon, or monsters in our case, we need to break free from the usual understanding of Dungeons and Dragons and go to a familiar Pokemon origin. To start our quote unquote monster battles, unlike in traditional D&D, we reveal the Pokemon's health by, whether it's a health bar or some kind of indicator of the Pokemon's health. This will allow players to make smart choices when trying to capture a certain monster. To capture said monster, one must have a capsule available. One can be purchased at any major city for a reasonable price, but it is lost if the monster capture fails. The trainer must make an animal handling or sleight of hand check to throw the capsule at the target monster. The DC always starts at 20, but goes down after certain criteria has been met. The DC goes down by 5 if the Pokemon is at a quarter of its health, and the DC goes down by an additional 2 if it is affected by a condition such as poison or sleep. This DC can be modified based on the challenge you want the encounter to be. Ideally, a DC 15 should be tough but not impossible if the trainer has proficiency in capturing monsters. You could lower the DC to 18 to start, should it be an easy catch, or even move it to 25 or more if it's some kind of legendary monster of legends. For the purpose of a one shot, I would just say there's one type of capsule, the very base Pokeball. But for a long running game, one could make various upgrades that you could that you can get that give you certain bonuses to capture in the right circumstances. Great balls giving you a +1 to your capture rating, or dusk balls giving you a +2 or 3, but only work that way when catching monsters in the dark. These would vary in price and quantity, but be careful going any higher than a +3 in this moment, because these DCs are based off of proficiency, and you'll have to adjust your difficulty curve accordingly. And that is catching a Pokemon.
Yeah, I like it, especially because as you kind of mentioned, one of the things I really liked about your system that you established was this idea of um, lowering the skill check um, based on health and things like that. Because I think I think everyone kind of remembers in their brains the first time that they take a Pokemon past 0 and they're not able to catch it, and they're just like, oh dang. So I think that it's an interesting idea to it make your players think maybe a little bit smarter about what to use, because maybe you're just trying to grind it out or you don't want that particular monster. Um, but if you're trying to catch a bunch, you have to play a little bit smarter and maybe use a little bit more finesse instead of um, just kind of being a big old wrecking ball. So
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
So for the
So
next part,
yes.
uh, I one of the things that I would recommend when you're playing a Pokemon game is a little different from other nerdy affairs. Usually, our goal is to simulate the nerdy affair title to its fullest extent, right? Like, if you were here with us last time, we really wanted to simulate what it was like to be in the movie Halloween. And
Hmm.
I'm going to do something a little different this time. I think you should actually do the opposite with Pokemon. I think that mixing Dungeons and Dragons and that style of game with Pokemon can create a very interesting and unique experience that you can only get here due to the limitations of the Pokemon video game.
I'm intrigued.
So, in Pokemon, the video game, the anime, what have you, we deal with catching, training, and battling Pokemon. That's it. Bare
Mm.
bones. That's all you do. Sure, there's a story there, and sure, you go around and fight people and get money, but that's baseline what you do. But I've often dreamed of a Pokemon game that dared to even remotely go beyond that. And you can do that here with Dungeons and Dragons. You can mix the elements that we take for granted in Dungeons and Dragons and put them in the Pokemon universe to have interesting scenarios. For an example, you're a fledgling trainer on their way to the Gold League. Your first tournament is almost upon you, and Team Rocket comes and steals your Pokemon. You now have to go on a quest to reacquire your prized monster while sneaking into a den of thieves who will outright kill you on sight and use those monsters that they stole from you to aid them in taking you out. So now we've combined the idea of like going into a thieves' den and taking out bandits like you would in poker, or like you would in a standard fantasy D&D campaign. But now we've added a layer of Pokemon to it. I mean, combining those experiences can have like a super cool impact. Imagine, if you will, that you have to save somebody because Team Rocket has literally stolen somebody and is holding them hostage for whatever reason. And imagine flying into their base on a Charizard that's shooting fireballs out of its mouth, while you, the party's wizard, is also casting fireballs from your mobile flying mount. Now tell me, how awesome does that sound?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
It's amazing, right?
yeah, and I think it's one of those deals where it is interesting that they kind of go back to the well of like your training in like a league, but like, as you play games, like they established that there are, archaeologists and um scientists and all of these other things. And so I understand why they went with like the sports league system, just because there's a mix of sense and it's a nice simple thing running forward. But to, yeah, kind of give it a more I don't know, like epic adventure versus just like grinding and getting good, it's kind of interesting. I like it.
Yeah, and I mean, what something that and this started because I was playing through Pokemon Fire Red, which the last time I did it, which was a while ago. And I remember Lieutenant Surge, who's the third, yeah, he's the third gym leader, and he was the lieutenant in some army,
Mm-hmm.
and he came back from war.
Yes.
Like, how cool is it that he went to fucking war with his Raichu at his side, blasting people with lightning bolts and stuff like that? You can do things like that in the Pokemon universe. And granted, I understand Pokemon is a kid show. They're not going to show fucking World War II style shots of like Lieutenant Surge taking people out while Raichu like literally electrocutes a guy to death. But like you can do that in a tabletop role playing game. You can do things where it gets a little more heated than oh man, Team Rocket, no no, and then they go, oh man, and then walk away. Right? Like you can do
Yeah.
a lot more with even just like your standard like just imagine changing like your base book of something in whatever tabletop role playing game, but then adding Pokemon to it, and it immediately becomes like, whoa, that's neat. I want to
Mm.
do that. So, I granted, I will say this is going to take some careful balancing because now you're no longer just the players and you're not just the monsters, you're both. But
Yes.
if you can tailor it correctly, you can have really awesome moments where you do get to ride a Pidgeot into battle with somebody else, or maybe you have to scale this impossible mountain and you have to avoid like debris, and so like you and your flying Pokemon, whichever one you picked, like have to weather the storm, or there's so many different things you can do. I mean, like the anime is a really good example of like how you do Pokemon and not just it being about trainer battles. Like they have races, they have like all sorts of weird competitions that don't necessarily mean battling. Like, yeah, I mean, in my opinion, you enhance your Pokemon game by incorporating the Dungeons and Dragon elements of your trainers being like actual adventurers, but also having companions that they keep in, Pokeballs. And that's my thought.
Yeah. Okay, and then my last thought is I put a little bit more effort into the building of the Pokemon. I'm not gonna lie to
Sure.
you. But so a
Well,
big
I mean,
question.
that's the meat and potatoes of it. You got to put a lot more effort into it than everything else kind of like builds upon that concept.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. But in any case, it's a little bit about Pokemon management. Um,
Yeah, hit me with that. I'm
and
curious how you do this.
so we kind of we kind of talked about these are games for kids, and they are video games, right? And so it's like, if you're out in the woods and you fall to a another trainer or maybe a particularly strong Pokemon, your Pokemon do not die, they faint. And then you can't use them until you give them like a revive, or you throw at them a potion or things like that. I know in Sword and Shield, I'm not sure about other ones, you can go camping with your Pokemon, which also can gain back a little bit of health for them and things like that. And so, much like Dungeons and Dragons, there are things you can purchase. You can purchase things like potions, mana potions can act maybe like your PP ups. Um, I do not know if there are necessarily revive potions, but they're
Yeah, there are
they're
revives.
there are mechanics like in Dungeons and Dragons. But the big thing I was thinking about was Poke Centers.
Oh
So,
yeah.
Pokemon by no means is like an easy game. Um, because there is a certain level of forgiveness that people love to point out that it is a world with free healthcare in the form of Poke Centers. The thing is that these centers are pretty well spaced out. And so sometimes when you're playing the game, sometimes you have to make the hard choice of traveling back to heal up properly or plow ahead. Um, and I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with doing this in your game, right? It's just that you really have to make it feel like a big choice for your players, right? If your Pokemon get injured or are damaged or are poisoned or are have fainted, um chances are it's going to be pretty dangerous for you as the player to head back safely to the nearest Poke Center. So if your whole party faints, there should be consequences to the actions. Perhaps it's losing gold. Perhaps it is your Pokemon like losing an ability or something like that. But in any case, I don't think that you should have Pokemon die if we're trying to stay in the spirit of the thing. Um, my idea is that, establish Poke Centers. These are real things that exist. But it should feel like a pretty big milestone for your players to find new ones that they can access or having to make the pretty difficult decision to trudge back to um, um, the previous one that they've already found, potentially costing them time, resources, or potentially putting them in graver peril than they were originally in. So my idea is I am pro the idea of Poke Centers because I feel like that's important for the feeling of the game. But it should be a pretty weighty decision to want to go back and get it or access them. So yeah, that is my thoughts. Once again, not 100% sure how that would work in an actual game, but I think you kind of need to have them to give your players that Pokemon experience.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing too. To this will tie back into my secondary idea of mixing Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe the penalty is that when you're out of Pokemon, those monsters will try to attack you.
Oh,
And
interesting. Yeah.
and while your Pokemon can't die because they faint, they go back into the Pokeball. Uh Motherfucker, that Ekans will kill you. And that's no good. So like you definitely need to go back if you run out of Pokemon. And sure, you're an adventurer. You can like fight off these Pokemon and get them to flee, but like I think that's why in the games they're just like, oh, well, you white out or black out or whatever, and just like go back to the nearest Poke Center because like you're a child, right? Like they don't want to be
Yeah.
like you have to survive an onslaught of Pidgeots that try to like maim you to death, but like this is Dungeons and Dragons or this is a fantasy world too, so like it could literally be like I'm out in the forest, all of my Pokemon are down, and now I have to get out while there are like tons of spiders that would like gobble me up in an instant. So, just a thought. You could do that as well.
Yeah. I actually think that that's a nice little tweaking to give it that D&D flavor.
Yeah.
But in any case, those are my thoughts for it. So, hey, look it.
Yeah.
They're laughing and uh they're they're seem to be having a nice time. So,
Yeah. Hanging
hey,
out, throwing Pokeballs.
and if I'm a gambling man, I would say that we'll see Dungeons and Dragons back in a couple of weeks.
Rough.
So in any case, hey Cody, if people like this episode and they want to learn more, where's a place that they can learn more?
They can go to our website at www.fandomroulette.com where all of our episodes go up as they upload to the internet. And there's a bunch of other stuff on there, like all the other shows that we do, and a various amount of information and a form at the bottom that if you feel so inclined, you can get your nerdy affair topics reached out to, and we can pick those apart and make them into the tabletop role playing game experience that you want.
And if people want to listen to this episode, but they don't necessarily use the same podcasting apps that you use, what are some apps where people can find episodes of this show to share with a friend?
We're on SoundCloud, YouTube, Google Play, iTunes, basically all of your podcasting catchers. All you got to do is search Fandom Roulette.
And hey, if people want to like reach out, say, send us a funny meme, check in with us, say they like the episodes, things like that. Are there any social medias that people can find us and follow us on?
Well, if you are a Twitter savvy person, you can find us at fandomr_podcast. That is our Twitter handle. But if you're more of a Facebook or Instagram user, you can search Fandom Roulette.
Also, please remember to like, rate, review, and subscribe. Hit the
Yeah.
bell, share it with a friend, write a comment. Any little bit that you can give us helps. That gives us the opportunity to kind of move up those ranks and get a little bit, um, keep making this stuff for you and the people that are listen to it as well. Hey,
Yeah.
we know that there's like a lot of stuff out there in the world that you can spend your time and listen to and engage with, and we want to thank you for spending some of that time with us here at Fandom Roulette.
Yeah, thanks.
And finally, as we always do at the end of every episode of Fandom Roulette, we want to thank you again for listening. And signing off for Fandom Roulette, this is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.